Good morning. This morning we're going to be reading about the Christian missionaries in the Pacific Northwest. Current issues, religious diversification. Since the arrival of white settlers in the 19th century, Christianity has been the most widespread religion in the Pacific Northwest. Not only did pioneers establish churches and religious communities, but missionaries worked hard to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. Over time, their efforts were largely successful, and the majority of American Indians abandoned their previous spiritual beliefs in favor of Christianity. In recent years, immigrants to the Pacific Northwest have brought a new religious diversity to the region. Currently, the religious denomination with the most adherents is Roman Catholicism. While as a whole, Protestant denominations have more members, they are spread over numerous churches, such as Lutherans, Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians, and others. During the 20th century, the Church of Latter day Saints, the Mormons, earned a significant number of followers, particularly in southern Idaho. Also entering the region in the 20th century were Jewish populations who often gravitated toward urban areas such as Portland and Seattle. The same is true for Muslims who only recently came to the Pacific Northwest in large numbers. In the past few decades, immigrants from Asia have also brought Hinduism and Buddhism to the area. This trend towards greater religious diversity will continue as long as the strong economy and high standards of living are found here. Keys to understanding. Catholic ladder. Physical object depicting the most important religious events in the history of Christianity. Very effective conversion tool for Roman Catholics. Catholic missionaries. Most prominent included Blanchet, Demers, Desmet, and Revelli. Techniques most successful overall. Lee's mission. Jason and Daniel Lee, first missionaries in the Pacific Northwest, focused on an area between Oregon City and Salem area of present-day Oregon. Nez Perce, largest Indian tribe in Pacific Northwest, worked closely with Henry and Eliza Spalding at Lapwai Mission. Protected Spalding from the Cayuse Indians in 1847. Protestant missionaries. Presbyterian and Methodist missionaries established mission in Puget Sound and Willamette areas, plus the interior. Unsuccessful overall. Henry and Eliza Spalding traveled with the Whitmans, established the Lapwai Mission, worked with Peaceful Nez Perce, created written alphabet and used the printing press, protected but closed mission. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman traveled west with William Gray and Spalding's, built Wailatpu Mission, worked with the Cayuse, Walla Walla, and Umatilla, successful mission on Oregon Trail until Marcus and Narcissa were killed by the Cayuse Indians. Whitman Massacre, November 29, 1847, 15 killed, many captured by the Cayuse Indians, a very significant historical event. Oregon Territory created in March 1848. Overview. The Christian missionary era, 1834 to 1847, was a very short but very important period in human history of the Pacific Northwest. During this time frame, several dedicated Roman Catholic and Protestant missionaries provided religious services to the whites and Indians alike. They also spent considerable effort attempting to convert Native Americans to their religion. Several missionaries constructed churches and established missions in the Willamette River Valley, Lee's Mission, and St. Paul's. Puget Sound lowlands, Nisqually, eastern Washington, Willatipu, and Tishmican, and northern Idaho, Cataldo, and Lapwai. The most widely known Protestant missionaries were Dr. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, Jason and Daniel Lee, and Henry and Eliza Spalding. The most prominent Roman Catholic missionaries were Father Francisco Norbert Blanchet, Father Modeste Demers, Father John Peter Desmet. Missionaries from both denominations were instrumental in teaching the Native Americans. Even though the overall results were mixed, their efforts brought a small degree of advancement. In addition, many mission sites became future settlements and cities. The missionary movement brought two culturally diverse groups together. And you can actually see a really good map of all of the mission sites. Easily, the most significant event of the Christian missionary era was the tragic Whitman massacre at the Wailatapuu Mission. The massacre closed one era and sadly opened a 30-year period of conflicts between Native Americans and settlers from 1847 to 1877. Historical era. Roman Catholic and Protestant missionaries represented the fourth migrational flow into the Pacific Northwest. The missionary period was very brief, lasting from 1834 to 1847. It began with Jason Lee's mission near Salem and ended with the Whitman massacre on November 29, 1847. The tragic killing of Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, prominent Protestant missionaries in the region, ended this period, but opened a 30-year period of violent conflicts between the Native Americans and the settlers of the Pacific Northwest. However, the missionary era brought a degree of advancement to the region that resulted in an ever-increasing flow of pioneers who became permanent settlers. Prominent missionaries. The missionary movement never involved very many missionaries. In 1840, there were only 13 Methodists, 6 Congregationalists, and 3 Roman Catholic priests living in the Pacific Northwest. No matter their numbers, these early missionary settlers played an important historical role in the early pioneer days of the region. Perhaps the best known and most influential of the Protestant missionaries were Jason Lee, Daniel Lee, Henry and Eliza Spalding, the Whitmans, and Elkanah and Mary Walker. The most important Roman Catholic ministers were Father Desmet, Demers, and Blanchet. These and other missionaries constructed historical missions at Lapwai, Wailatapuu, Tishmican, Cataldo, Lee's Mission, Willamette, The Dalles, Nisqually, Colville, Sacred Heart, and many other mission sites, referred to map 7-1. These early missions were located throughout the region. Many of today's prominent communities and major cities were established near these missions. Reasons for the missionary period. Why did the Christian missionary era begin in the Pacific Northwest? There are several important reasons. Originally, early explorers brought priests and ministers to the Pacific Northwest to meet their own spiritual needs as Christians. Fur trappers and fur traders appreciated the spiritual support of these men and women who endured the same hardships in a rather hostile environment. Although these fur traders and trappers were not particularly religious, many of the French Canadians were devout Roman Catholics. In a signed agreement, 1821, the British-owned Hudson's Bay Company was obliged to provide for the religious demands and needs of the residents living within areas the company controlled. In reality, few religious services were provided. In many ways, it was the Native Americans who really sought the Word of God. A few Christianized Iroquois Indians worked hard to Christianize some Native Americans located in the Northern Rockies from 1812 until 1821. In 1831, a band of 10 Flatheads and Nez Perce Indians traveled to St. Louis, Missouri. They were attempting to meet William Clark. They sought the white man's Book of Heaven, which they believed was an instrument of the white man's power. As a result of this attempt, several Christian leaders quickly reacted. The Christians interpreted this gesture as a sincere desire of the Indians to learn about and be converted to the Christian faith, albeit Protestant or Roman Catholic. Perhaps they were too optimistic. In any case, shortly thereafter, several missionary groups in the eastern United States began organizing missionary expeditions to go to the Pacific Northwest. These missionaries would go to the Pacific Northwest, construct missions, and attempt to teach and convert local Native Americans to Christianity. Protestant mission objectives. The main reasons for building Protestant missions were 1. Christianize the Native Americans, 2. To civilize the Native Americans in accordance with the accepted social and economic ways of the settlers, 3. To develop an economic base to support the missions, their families, and other settlers, 4. To provide religious services for the settlers and fur traders, 5. To strengthen the claim of the United States to the Oregon country, 6. To spread the Protestant religion to the Native Americans before Roman Catholic missionaries did, and 7. To educate both settler and Native American children living in the Willamette River Valley and throughout the region. The basic tactic of Protestant missionaries was to build a mission at a central location and to attract people, both settlers and Native Americans, to live and work at the mission. It was therefore necessary for the Native Americans to change their way of life, conforming to the settlers' accepted standards. The missionaries accomplished many of these objectives, thus making a significant contribution to the region's growth and prosperity. Protestant missionaries. Lee's mission. The Methodist Church sent its first missionaries, Jason and David Lee, to Oregon in 1834. Jason Lee wanted to establish a mission in the area inhabited by the Nez Perce Indians. Dr. John McLaughlin and Fort Vancouver residents argued against this because of the frequent wars between the neighboring Flathead and Blackfoot tribes. The Lees, following Dr. McLaughlin's advice, chose a mission site 10 miles north of present-day Salem, Oregon, in the Willamette River Valley, where the Native Americans had been ravaged by the measles epidemic from 1828 to 1832. Those coastal Indians who survived the epidemic were considered peaceful. With the success of Lee's mission, soon many settlers moved into the Willamette Valley of Oregon. In 1836, Dr. Elijah White brought women for Jason and Daniel Lee to marry as well as a few other families. In 1840, 52 settlers arrived, resulting in 2 additional missions in the valley. Missionaries and settlers came to the Willamette River Valley not to extract resources and then leave, as so many others had, but to become permanent residents. The foundation for the region's future growth was laid by the 1830s and early 1840s by these courageous and far-sighted missionaries. American Board missionaries. Soon, other Protestant missionary groups organized expeditions to the Pacific Northwest. One such group was the American Board of Commissioners for the Foreign Mission, a group of Congregationalists, Dutch Reformers, and Presbyterians. In 1836, this board selected 5 missionaries to go to the Oregon country. They were William Gray, Henry and Eliza Spalding, and Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. After a long and difficult overland journey to Fort Vancouver, they returned to the interior region of the Oregon country. Whereas Jason and Daniel Lee had settled in the peaceful and pleasant Willamette River Valley, the Whitmans, Spaldings, and William Gray built their missions in the central area of the Columbia Plateau. The Spaldings. Henry and Eliza Spalding and William Gray selected a mission site among the friendly Nez Perce Indians. The mission site was near the confluence of the Lapwai and Clearwater rivers. The Lapwai mission was one of the most successful missions, lasting from 1836 to 1847. Because of the Cayuse War between 1847 and 1850 and the Indian Wars of the 1850s, Henry Spalding closed the mission until his return to Lapwai in 1871. The Spaldings and William Gray were successful because of the friendliness and adaptability of the Nez Perce, their own ability to communicate with the Native Americans, their ability to teach and maintain good relations with the other mission residents. Henry Spalding developed a written alphabet for the Native Americans' languages, printed parts of the Bible for them to read. Nonetheless, the Spaldings might have suffered the same fate as Marcus and Narcissa Whitman if it were not for the protection of the Nez Perce during those turbulent years. The Whitmans. Dr. Marcus Whitman and his wife Narcissa founded the Waialapu Mission. The mission site was located about 25 miles east of Fort Walla Walla. It was located only 6 miles west of the present-day city of Walla Walla, Washington. The Whitmans chose to perform their missionary work with the less friendly Cayuse and Walla Walla tribes of southeastern Washington and northeastern Oregon. The Waialapu Mission was located along the Oregon Trail, which eventually became the main overland route from Independence, Missouri to Fort Vancouver in the Willamette River Valley. The Whitmans mission was an important stop and resting point along the 2,000 plus mile Oregon Trail. Between the Waialapu mission construction in the fall of 1836 and its destruction November 29, 1847, virtually every immigrant to Oregon visited the Waialapu mission and the Whitmans. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman worked hard to establish a successful mission. Marcus, a doctor, was helpful to all residents of the Waialapu mission, both settlers and Native Americans. His ability to treat diseases and injuries was an important service only he could provide. However, local Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla Indians saw Dr. Whitman as a medicine man or shaman. Smallpox, measles, and cholera epidemic killed many non-Native Americans and even more of the less naturally immune Native Americans. Ill feelings resulted from those tragic epidemics. The Pacific Northwest Native Americans would commonly kill a tribe's shaman if they believed that the shaman had lost his mystical powers to heal the ill and injured. It was this factor, perhaps more than any other, that led to the Cayuse attack on the Waialapu mission on November 29, 1847. On that historic day, the Cayuse Indians killed Marcus and Narcissa Whitman and 13 other Waialapu mission residents. The three main benefits of the Whitmans' work, ironically, became the three basic causes for alienating the Cayuse. These factors were Dr. Whitman's medical knowledge and aid, Waialapu's location on the Oregon Trail and its attraction to immigrating settlers, and three, the Whitmans' attempt to convert Native Americans to Christianity, making them fit the white American mold. An additional factor which caused violence towards the Native Americans and their mission was Narcissa's negative and aloof attitude toward the local Native Americans. She was distrusting of the Cayuse. They neither liked nor respected her. Other Protestant missionaries. Not all Protestant missionary work in the Pacific Northwest was done by the Lees, Spaldings, and Whitmans. Other prominent missionaries included Reverend Samuel Parker, Cyrus Shepherd, Philip Edwards, and Courtney Walker. In 1837, William Gray left the Spaldings Lapwai mission to return east. Gray persuaded the American board to send 8 more missionaries to the Pacific Northwest. Of these 8, 2 were recently married couples, Elkanah and Mary Walker, and Mr. and Mrs. Cushing Ells. The Walkers and the Ells built the Tishmican mission, where they lived and worked with the Spokane Indians. It's very important to recognize the significant contributions of the women who married these prominent Protestant missionaries. Active marriage partners included Mary Richardson Walker, Narcissa Whitman, Eliza Hart Spalding, Anna Marie Pittman Lee, Mary Augusta Dix Gray, and Tabitha Brown. Each wife supported their husband's work, endured the rigorous life in the wilderness, raised their children, and made significant individual contributions to the region's history and future growth. In addition, these women's writings provided insight into the history of the times. Roman Catholic missionaries. During this era, Roman Catholics also sent a number of priests to work with the Native Americans. These Catholic missionaries established mission sites throughout the Pacific Northwest. Three important Roman Catholic missionaries were Father Francois Blanchet, Father Modeste Demers, Father Pierre Jean Desmet. In most historians' opinions, the Roman Catholic missions were slightly more successful with the region's Native Americans than the better known Protestant missionaries for several reasons. Missionary success. Several possible explanations for the Roman Catholic missionaries' success were: one, they did not encourage further immigration into the area; two, their teaching effectiveness was enhanced by the Catholic ladder; three, their rituals and church ceremonies were attractive to Native Americans; four, their mission sites along the coastal and plateau tribes were widespread; five, they did not emphasize changing the Native American behavior and way of life; six, they traveled among the Native American tribes rather than requiring the Native Americans to live at or near the mission. End of the missionary period. The missionary era officially lasted only from 1834 to 1847. Even after 1847, following the Whitman Massacre, the missionaries contributed to the violent conflicts between settlers and Native Americans occurring from 1847 until 1877. The Native Americans were confused and frustrated by the different teachings of Protestant and Roman Catholic missionaries. Another contributing factor was the spiritual conflict for Native Americans between their animism versus the abstract concepts of the Christian religion. Despite these problems, the Christian missionary era initially opened the whole Pacific Northwest region to further population growth and economic development. Have a great day, everybody.